Hello, everyone. We'll start in a few minutes, but as we wait, maybe as you join, you could write on the chat box where you're joining from, so we know where people are joining from today. Thank you. Great, we have a lot of people joining from all over. Hi, Anais, I see your message. Thank you. Rwanda, India, Kenya, Paris, Argentina. Great. I think we'll start. We are 5 minutes past 8:30, and we have quite a packed panel today. So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sujata Bordoloy, and I coordinate the Global Working Group to End School-Related Gender-Based Violence, a coalition hosted by the United Nations Girls Education Initiative and UNESCO. Welcome to the webinar on shifting gender and social norms, strategies, and promising approaches presented to you by the Global Working Group to mark the 16 days of activism to end gender-based violence. The theme of the webinar today is an important one, particularly as we see a rise in gender-based violence during lockdowns caused by COVID-19. Deeply entrenched belief systems, harmful and discriminatory norms and values make certain acts of violence normalized and hidden, whether it's at school or at home. In order to prevent and halt the intergenerational cycle of violence, we must work towards promoting norms and values that work for all and challenge those that condone violence and discrimination. As sites where gender-based violence can occur, schools can be a transformative space where we can promote a gender-responsive, respectful, and non-violent culture. Social norms within the community influence attitudes and behaviors in school, and at the same time, schools can also be a locus for change, for stimulating change within communities. Through this panel, we bring perspectives from the education sector on using curricular-based approaches and enabling teachers to challenge existing norms within their classrooms in a range of contexts, from Eswatini to South Africa to Ecuador. So it's an exciting panel today. The run of show looks a little bit like this. Next slide, please. So we have our colleague Jada, who will take us through some basic housekeeping rules with using Zoom, using the chat box, raising your hand, things like that. We will have a panel discussion which will be moderated by two very dynamic young people who I'm going to introduce in a minute, followed by an audience Q&A and closing remarks. We've put aside about an hour and 15 minutes for this, hoping that we will have enough time in the end for question and answers. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce the two young activists who will be moderating this panel today. Opiemi Famodimu, she's the program assistant in education and girl child literacy with Youth Hub Africa. She's based in Lagos, Nigeria, and she's a graduate of international relations with experience in advocacy, community and youth development with a focus on young women and girls. And we have Bongiwe Mayome. She's a high school teacher and co-founder of Girls Leading Change. Bongiwe is a South African activist for women's and right to sexual and reproductive health, education, and protection from gender-based violence. She's a graduate of Nelson Mandela University and is currently pursuing a postgraduate degree in education. So with that, over to Jada for a quick housekeeping and then to Opiemi to start us off. Thank you so much, and look forward to a very interesting discussion.
Thank you very much, Sujata. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Just to take you through some housekeepings for today's webinar. First point I'd like to make is that we're all working with different levels of internet access. So if we experience any glitches or any issues along the way, we ask that you be patient with us, and we'll move along or try and resolve it as quick as possible. We really would love to hear from as many people as possible today. So if you're contributing, please keep your contributions short and concise, so we can hear from as many people as possible. You'll see there's a Q&A feature. If you have a question or a comment, you could use that. There's also a chat box. So please use that to leave any comments, ask questions to our panelists as well. If you have any issues, you can see my colleague Gloria's email there, gdiamond@ungai.org. If you're having any difficulties at all, please don't hesitate to email us. And just to let you all know that we will be recording today's webinar, so you'll be able to watch back. So thank you very much again for joining today. One more thing before I go. We will be holding a couple of quizzes during the webinar. So we'll be using Mentimeter. Perhaps you've used it before, quite popular these days. It's very straightforward to use. Simply grab your phone and go to your browser. You type in www.menti.com, and we will be displaying the code on screen shortly when we do the quizzes. And you'll be able to answer in real time and take part in the quizzes. So perhaps just have your phone ready, and it'd be great to get everyone to participate in that. Great, thank you very much. Back to you, Sujata.
Over to Opiemi. Opiemi, over to you to start us off.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Learning Series webinar. Sujata has introduced everyone and has given us a run of what today's webinar is about. So I'd like to say welcome and thank you for attending today's webinar. First of all, we would kick off with introducing our speakers, and we have seasoned experts who myself and my co-moderator Bongiwe will be introducing. Our first speaker is Basil Manuel. Basil is a teacher. He has worked as a teacher, the head of department and principal of a large primary school in South Africa. He is the executive director of National Professional Teachers Organization in South Africa. And he has worked extensively in strengthening teachers' professionalism, as well as gender equality in South Africa. Caroline Decomber is one of our speakers, is the country program manager of VVOB Education and Development in Ecuador. She has worked several years as a quality coordinator in Belgium, a child violence prevention expert in Bolivia, and also as an education advisor at VVOB Ecuador before she became the program manager of VVOB. She has strengthened the capacity of teachers in professional development and effective school leadership in early childhood, primary and secondary education. Thank you, Basil, and thank you, Caroline, for joining us in today's webinar. My colleague Bongiwe would introduce the remaining speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ope, thank you. Hello, everybody. Once again, welcome to this session. The following speaker that I'll be introducing has worked as a secondary school educator, followed that up by becoming a curriculum designer for the life skills education before she joined the HIV and education department in 2019. She does amazing work with comprehensive sexuality education at UNESCO. Please join me in welcoming Ubethusile Mahlalela. Also welcoming Nosipho Twala, which is a gender activist, who is a gender activist and associate at Gender at Work. Nosipho Twala is an educator as well, and a researcher at the Labor Research Service, a non-profit labor support organization which specializes in research, dialogue building, and facilitates participatory education for the trade union movement. Once again, welcome to all of our speakers, and we look forward to a very productive session with you all. Right, so we will move on to, as Jada has mentioned, our Mentimeter bit, right? So it's going to show up on your screen right now how I would like for our audience to engage with us, right? It wouldn't make sense that our panelists have all the attention to themselves, so valued, but we would like to hear from the audience as well. And so this is how you can communicate with our panelists, right? On your screen, in a second, you will see the website, right? You'll go into your browser and you'll punch in this website and the code that will be displayed in a bit, right? What are you engaging us on, right? So the question we're asking you on our first Mentimeter, which is our first of 2 Mentimeters that we'll be having with you guys. First question we're asking you is, what are gender and social norms, right? So that ties in with our theme. We want to hear from you. What comes up in your mind? What comes to mind when you hear gender and social norms? So just a word, a phrase, or whatever, you know, whatever you are moved to sharing with us, please share that with us on our Mentimeter. I'll read the website to you. That is www.menti.com. When you're in there, please punch in the code 2137724. My accent may be a bit thick, so I'm gonna repeat that. It's www.menti.com, and the code that we're using is 2137724. Right, so we've already have some people punching in there. When you're thinking of gender and social norms, we have one audience member thinking control and prescribed roles, which is very interesting. And it's very interesting, and I suppose we want to investigate the context that you're speaking from, and in what context is it representing a prescribed role. We have some preconceived notions, expectations, a bit of a theme going across there. We have a lot of expectation, control, expectations from gender, beliefs on gender roles, which is amazing. We have limitations, a very interesting contribution there. There's an interesting one that I'm seeing there, that's opportunities. So when you're thinking of gender and social norms, this audience member thinks of opportunity. I would love to interrogate how it represents opportunity. So a lot of engagement coming through there. Amazing, amazing, amazing contribution. Please keep those coming. We will have this Mentimeter up, and we'll keep engaging the audience on those. And hopefully as we continue with our session, we get to expand on those terms that you are introducing for us there. All right. So please don't be nervous. Share your restrictive is a very interesting one there that we have. So that ties in with the control bit and prescription bit. Religion is another term. So maybe our speakers, as we go over these Mentimeter terms that our audience is sharing, you might want to think about how these tie in or relate to what it is you're going to share with us. And hopefully we engage with these terms in more detail when we get to our Q&A towards the end of our session. Expectations, prescribed roles, equality. Equality is an interesting one. Not something that you generally hear when you think of gender and social norms. You generally do not think equality, but it's very interesting that some of us do. Right. Control. There's some more coming in there. You'll forgive my glasses, a bit restrictive there as well.
I think we have to lot of social norms and gender norms coming in from our audience. So I'm sure our speaker has a lot to discuss and address regarding this. So it's great receiving response from the audience. Right? Yeah.
All right, so thank you, Ope. I'd like to thank our audience members for sharing those. Please keep them coming. We'll discuss those in more detail. I'd like for us to just shift our discussion now and, go and engage with our first speaker, Mambethusile Mahlalela. Mambethusile Mahlalela, the question we'd like to pose to you, and this ties in with what our Mentimeter contributions we're getting there. The question we're asking you today is, what interventions have been put in place in Eswatini to address the issue of school-related gender-based violence? Could you please take us through what you do at UNESCO and how your interventions have been helpful in this regard?
Thank you so much, Bongiwe. At Eswatini, what we've actually done to actually address issues of gender-based violence, school-related gender-based violence, UNESCO, in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, piloted the Connect with Respect toolkit. And I suppose that question would be, what is the Connect with Respect toolkit? It is an educational resource that is meant to address issues regarding to school-related gender-based violence. It's actually a resource that is curriculum or classroom-based, and we piloted this resource in September 2019 to December 2019 and extended the pilot from February 2020 to March 2020. And from this resource, we were able to actually train teachers in advance before they actually taught some Form 1 learners, because that is grade 8. We call it Form 1 in Eswatini. So what happened is that prior to the training of the teachers, we also were in a position to orient school head teachers and deputy head teachers so that they would have buy-in and support the program during the pilot. So in August this year, we actually had some teachers coming in to give us feedback on the pilot. And I must say, the response was overwhelmingly positive, because the teachers like the program and so did the learners, and they actually advocated for, or rather say endorsed, that it be placed in the curriculum. We also invited the subject panel members, that is life skills education panel members, to endorse, because anything in Eswatini that goes into the curriculum needs to go through subject panels. They need to approve. They are the approving body. So they have approved for this program to actually be rolled out to all the schools. In September, we also had a training of curriculum designers, or rather an orientation of curriculum designers, and they too are going to integrate the program into the primary school curriculum, which means basically, as Eswatini, as an intervention, we are introducing the Connect with Respect into the curriculum. And the big question is, what does Connect with Respect address? It addresses issues of gender and social norms, and it also creates an awareness on the importance of positive relationship attitudes towards gender and positive relationships that are nonviolent. Thank you. Over.
Amazing, Mambethusile. That is amazing work that you're doing there. I think what is noteworthy there, of course, it's all amazing, is the concept of introducing respect within the curriculum, right? And I think that ties in so beautifully with the work that you do or used to do as a curriculum designer. It's amazing that we can look at education as a change agent, as opposed to just, the humdrum of in and out, solving for X and, you know, other academic purposes, which are equally important, but also as a positive contributor in society. So amazing work that you're doing there. Hopefully we engage you more on this project or this program as we continue. I would like for us to move to our next discussion. Ope, would you like to take that over? And I'll see you guys in a bit.
Okay, thank you, Bongiwe. That was an amazing session by Miss Beth. Thank you very much. So our next speaker, our next question goes to Caroline from VVOB. So Miss Caroline, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, so our question, right, would be how is VVOB worked with teachers to address and challenge gender norms, and also to create safe space and also supportive environment for students? Over to you.
Thank you, Piyemi. In Ecuador, the Ministry of Education and VVOB have been working together to build support systems for teachers and school leaders to deal with these harmful social norms and prevent and address gender-based violence in schools. We have been developing schools' teams' capacities for a whole school approach, using students' life projects to raise awareness about negative gender stereotypes and how these affect students' school performance and self-expectations. Now, on how to do this effectively, it is very important to bear in mind when you support teachers that they already carry a big responsibility regarding students' academic performance. So it is really necessary that teachers don't feel that bringing awareness about negative gender stereotypes adds more weight to that responsibility, risking to demotivating teachers. So to tackle this challenge, we have adopted two strategies. The first one is developing a set of tools, like you see on the slide, that offer activities, but they're not only directed to teachers. Each tool has activities to all those involved in the school community, including school leaders, students, school counselors, and on some occasions they are also directed to parents. This makes the teacher feel supported and part of a new and positive common visions. So these tools work around issues as violence, discrimination due to gender identity, career guidance, preventing teen pregnancies, teen parenthood, building your life projects. The methodologies and activities used in those tools are concrete, are tangibles, and really easy to introduce by teachers. They are also aligned with and easy to integrate in the existing curriculum. Can you pass me to the next slide, please? And the second strategy that helps to effectively challenge harmful gender norms is to provide tools to work with students of all ages. So the main tool we have on Building Your Life project starts from early childhood education. And the result is that when teachers take on a new student group, these students are already aware of gender focus and are working both individually and as a whole community on developing a healthy sense of being. So as students grow, they can positively build over the foundations set by the previous teacher, adding to generate a positive and shared vision at school level. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Ms. Caroline. That was such a great one. So at the end of the day, we can see that we all have collective responsibility towards ending school-related gender-based violence. That's a really great one, Ma. Thank you. So over to Bongiwe as she goes next to the second Mentimeter question.
Thank you, Ope, and thank you very much, Karen. That was very informative. I think you bring us beautifully into our next, the next part of our session here. So we would like to go over the next Mentimeter, right? In the first Mentimeter, we asked you as the audience and as our panel, what are gender and social norms, right? Now, you got some interesting answers: equality, restriction, how girls should act, stereotypes, equality, expectation, religion, control, right? So some very different responses we were getting there. But I think what we see, the common thread there, is we can see some positive gender norms and some very harmful gender norms, which takes us to the next Mentimeter, which you see on the screen now. We're asking you now as the audience members to delve a bit deeper into the surface, right? What are some strategies that we can use to effectively shift harmful social norms when working in schools, right? Because we're working in schools, we're working with children, we're working within a microcosm of society, right? So whatever it is that we engage with and find in our schools is representative of what we will find in larger society. So how do we sort of interrogate and maneuver ways around those social norms, harmful and positive, right? So nice responses we're getting there is communication. Very powerful term. If used effectively, communication could be one of our most powerful tools towards alleviating and addressing this whole issue of gender inequality, right? Some comprehensive sexuality education, which is beautiful. I think Umamu Cecilia will agree very much with that one. Comprehensive sexuality education, once again, very popular one, that one. Encouraging and facilitating girls' leadership, intensely powerful. Teachers should also talk about LGBTQ issues, right? Again, another thing I want us to do is delve deeper into the surface. How do we better equip, right, teachers to be in a suitable and proper position to talk about these issues with learners? Extracurricular activities, programs specifically designed to boys and men. So I'd like to speak on that a bit more. We'll get into it as the discussion continues. Using interactive pedagogies, which is very interesting from a teaching perspective and curriculum development perspective. All right, promoting a gender equal environment, powerful one. Codes of conduct, posting and enforcing school codes of conduct. Very interesting and very different responses that we're getting here. Definitely delves us deeper into our discussion, and hopefully as we continue, Mr. Basil Manuel from NAPTOSA will be able to take us deeper into this discussion, looking at so how do we implement some of these strategies. And so the question we're asking you, Mr. Basil, if you will please join us, is what strategies have you used to empower teachers to shift norms and address school-related gender-based violence? Right, so what strategies have you used to empower? Powerful words are used there. Over to you, Mr. Manuel.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. At first, we had to decide what exactly is it that we need to do to be able to shift these norms and to address SRGBV. And we identified 4 issues: the voice of people, both male and female, the capacity of the union itself to design and lead programs, and of course, increase knowledge that would help us to prevent SRGBV, and then of course, advocacy. Let us not assume that because a union has decided to participate in something that everybody is on board and everybody is running in the same direction. That is a fabrication and a lie. It is not true. So we turned our attention to the union. But before I get there, we try to achieve these 4 things I've mentioned by adopting the SRGBV framework. Some of the people reluctantly, we had to drag them along. And then of course, we had to start educating more about our code of professional ethics. Now the code is there. Every South African teacher is supposed to subscribe to the code. But NAPTOSA had also designed its own charter of professionalism, around which we held our members to account. And of course, through that, support the leadership of women and girls and create the change teams. And the change teams were supposed to take this further. But of course, besides collaborating with stakeholders and giving opportunities for teachers to speak out. It was to get to the learners, because remember that this is partially about teachers, but it's also about learner attention. Now I'm coming back to how we addressed it with the union. First of all, get it onto the agenda. This had to be a fixed agenda item so that it was in the face of everybody, even the denialists, so that they started becoming aware of the things that we needed to do. And it became a norm to do some of these things. And of course, our structures from the national to the province to the branch had to set up teams to start addressing SRGBV, to give voice to women and girls so that we start talking about this, not forgetting the boys, because the boys too become victims. So when we adopted this Charter of Professionalism, there were a couple of things. One of our statements says, we refrain from inappropriate and improper relations with learners, be it physical, sexual, political, emotional. And that's a tall order, particularly from people who have traditionally ignored this. And that started the ball rolling, modeling respect, diversity. And the Charter for Professionalism certainly put us on the right trajectory. Now, I know my time is just about up, but all our attendees at union site reps meetings had to reaffirm the Charter of Professionalism in relation to our role to start empowering and stopping SRGBV. Hopefully, when I speak a little further, I will talk more about how that worked. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely, Mr. Manuel. That was very informative. I think that the big draw from what you've just discussed with us is you can never have much awareness, right? You need to put gender-based violence in people's faces, put it in their conversations so that action, meaningful action, can occur within the spaces that we all individually influence in and out of school. So amazing work, Mr. Basil. We'll talk about it in depth as we continue to the Q&A. Over to you, Opeyemi.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Bongiwe. And that was a beautiful session from Mr. Manuel. So talking about advocacy, talking about building the capacities of teachers, particularly in the union, right? We would go over to Mr. Nosifo, who is a gender activist and is also an associate at Gender at Work. So Mr. Nofiso, please, we would want you to tell us about your work with union members and creating awareness and the causes of school-related gender-based violence. So what have you done? What has your organization done in regards to creating awareness and also working with union members, right, on school-related gender-based violence? Over to you, Mr. Nosifo, sorry.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon to everyone, good evening, and good morning. When we started the education unions take action to stop school-related gender-based violence initiative, it draws on the collective aspects of 4 key partners. Firstly, UNICEF, UNGAI, EI, and affiliated education unions, and us as Gender at Work, because each partner brings significant expertise and capacity in this respective area. And I'm sure we all agree that collaboration strengthens the impact. And the project was launched in January, I think 2016, with financial support from Global Affairs Canada. It was a 3-year program, and it enabled the education union movement and its members to develop effective and sustainable approaches to addressing gender-based violence as it manifests in the education system and in different unions and country context. Because in the first phase, 7 unions from East and Southern Africa participated, and in the second phase, 2 unions from West Africa and the EI regional office participated.
The program used what we call a gender action learning process as a participatory approach rooted in the principles of gender transformative change. Through this approach, participants get to understand the nature of gender equality and gender-based violence in their context. And also the gender action learning approach challenge and change gender-powered dynamics of an organization, both internally and in its programmatic work. And before we even started with the gender action learning process, is called the GAL process, so I will shorten it because of time. Before we started this process, we had a meeting with the general secretaries of each participating union to share their commitment and experiences in tackling school-related gender-based violence. This ensured buy-in and ownership to the program from the top union leadership. Mr. Basil Manuel is one of the general secretaries who participated. Following this meeting, the first step was to have the GAL process, and we're called Hearing Our Story, where 20 to 35 union members from the different unions participated, and all these meetings were held at the union head office. You know, when you invite union members to the head office, already even the unions can see that, look, our organization, our union has taken this project, and that is very important for political buy-in. And the objective of this meeting was for participants to share their experiences of gender-based violence in their schools and unions and build a shared understanding of the issue. And this is a kind of a participatory organizational assessment. And then we had what we call hearing our story. And hearing our story meeting provided the initial impetus, the spark, if I can say it, or a wake-up call that demanded agent response. And many participants use what they came to call hearing our stories meetings as one of their main strategy of raising awareness and galvanizing action. Storytelling, if I must say briefly, it's a feminist pedagogy, and the power of storytelling to deepen understanding and build empathy and drawing on lived experiences was key. And most participants, you know, when I must remember, jumped when they started to tell their stories. There were a lot of similarities and common themes running through all the stories that they were sharing. And they were humbled to learn that they were part of a system that some of them were saying removes girls from school due to violence, or maybe learners from school due to violence. And then following this hearing our story, each union formed an internal change team. And I think we can share the first picture. The first picture, you can say that is a change team made up of 4 or 5 members from different levels of the union structure to drive the gender action learning process moving forward. And during the first peer learning workshop, which is, this picture was taken during the first peer learning workshop, change teams were supported to design change experiments, specific actions to try and bring about change in equitable gender norms, and more specifically to address school-related gender-based violence within their unions and schools. I want to say that the peer learning has been a core and successful strategy to sustain participants' commitment and to find creative solutions to challenges encountered in the process. One other strategy we used with teachers. Yes.
Ma'am Nosifo, so
Yes, the
sorry,
last
so
one.
sorry to cut you off. This is all amazing. I think we can continue the discussion a bit further in our Q&A. We're just running a bit behind schedule. So sorry to cut you off.
Thank you.
I would like to hand over to Ope. Ope, would you please take?
Yeah, thank you for coming in there, Bongire. I was actually enjoying our session and the work of our organization, right? Thank you very much, ma'am, for informing us and also helping us know what the organization and the union is doing to address school-related gender-based violence. Next, we would have our speaker, Ms. Caroline, come on board. She's going to be sharing with us the lessons learned from our organization's work in supporting teachers in Ecuador to basically challenge gender and gender norms, as well as harmful gender norms. Yeah. Over to you, Ms. Caroline.
Thank you very much, Opeyemi. For the last 10 years, VVOB has been developing tools and learning trajectories for student counselors, school leaders, and teachers in order to build a safe and supportive school environments, as I mentioned before. So we do this in collaboration with Ecuador's Minister of Education. And during this time, I'm certain that's also a situation that is very common. The ministry has experienced a constant turnover in personnel, shifts in public policies, shifts in priorities. So a large part of our technical assistance has been focused on making sure that even with all these changes, all the materials and methodologies develop from the same core concepts and cross-cutting approaches. So what we have provided in all the tools is a common set of looking glasses, including gender focus. This consistency and continuity in view and approaches has been really an important asset for our technical assistance and a major lesson for future intervention to regard that we have all these common core concepts throughout all the tools and documents. Another important lesson has been the strategic use of language and concepts in order to avoid certain sensitivities in society. For example, the use of the words gender perspective causes a discomfort with certain social groups here in Ecuador. So we tried to avoid this, changing a bit the names or making it more inclusive so that it would be better accepted. For example, we have changed the title instead of including gender focus in TVET, we have been changing it to including men and women in a better management of diversity in TVET. Also, for example, on pregnancies, in Ecuador, we don't have a word that mentions parenthood. So we have used maternity and paternity to be as inclusive as possible. Like Mr. Manuel rightfully mentioned, it helps and it makes the tools more relevant if we include boys and young men, and not only in the title of our tools, but also in the activities and methodologies. It's building on the relevance of an inclusive and responsible approach. The next slide, please. Another big lesson that we have learned is also to connect and mutually reinforce both of our strategies that we have been working on for safer school environments. We have been working on restorative practices on the one hand and building student life projects with a focus on career guidance on the other. So what we see is that elements of each of these strategies are key to tackle gender-based challenges. For example, restorative circles work on building democracy and respectful interpersonal relations as gender violence prevention, address teen pregnancy and parenthood, preventing girls' school dropouts due to early pregnancies, challenging social norms through self-knowledge and seeking information in career guidance activities, Interconnecting these strategies help us supply school communities with really a bunch of diverse methods that can be adapted to each context. We have also integrated the lesson learned from the training trajectory to build safe and supportive school environments on the importance of this whole school vision that I was talking about in online learning trajectory on building student life projects with focus on career guidance that we are currently developing. So what happens there is that to subscribe to the module, we thought it was crucial for schools to form a promoter team within the schools that includes a defined number of teachers, student counselors and school leaders of the same schools that are ready to commit on working on a common project in this subject for their whole schools. This is a simple strategy to include the different functions within the schools to implement a whole school support approach. But it really makes the interventions and tools more meaningful and effective since they are backed by the whole community. Thank you very much. Back to you, Piyemi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Caroline. That's a really beautiful one. Thank you very much. So next on, because we're a bit out of time, would Bongiwe would talk to or would help provide questions for our next speaker. Bongiwe, over to you, please.
Thank you, Open. Thank you to you, Carolyn. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to that cut off a bit, but I caught the bit that stood out to me about how interventions need to be adaptable to the context in which they are being implemented. So that adaptability, I think, would contribute to how effective an intervention will or can be. All right, so that takes us to our next bit here. I would like to speak to Mambetu Sile and Mr. Basil here. And I just want to draw on the wealth of experience that you have working with teachers. And I would like to know how
Hi, Bongiwe, are you there? Can you hear us? Okay, so I would cover in here for Bongiwe, and basically she's trying to ask Ms. Beth and Mr. Basil how, if they could share more stories regarding the roles of teachers as change agents to address harmful social and gender norms, right? Based on your experience with teachers, working within union, how has teachers been the agents of change in addressing this issue? Over to you, Ms. Beth.
Thank you so much, Oyama. Opemia. What I can say is when we did the pilots, we learned a lot of lessons. And first and foremost, the most important thing is to actually go through some training. You have to train the teachers. As I mentioned earlier on, part of the things that we did was to train the teachers. And amazingly, it was a shock to us that they didn't even know the difference between gender and sex. So training goes a long way. And can you please pass on to the next slide so that you can appreciate what I'm about to say right now. These are just basically the teachers. And one of the teachers, when we were doing the evaluation of the pilot, said undergoing the training changed her mind so much that it improved the relationships between the teachers and the learners. And one of the things that we picked up from the pilot as well is that basically it decreased the amount of violence that learners were actually subjected through corporate punishment, because teachers were not aware that basically that is violence, because it was basically the norm in the school to actually discipline learners using corporal punishment. So one of the things the teacher said was that, you know, the training made her to actually introspect herself and actually consider some of the things that they do to the learners and wonder, are we really violating the learners in Eswatini by doing all the things that we do? And some of the things that they said they used to do was actually call the learners names, label them, and so forth. So even amongst the learners themselves, bullying was actually reduced because it is basically something that was also the norm within the school environment. But of course, it's not something that will change overnight. In some areas, it is still going on. But as we actually roll out the program, we're believing that those are some of the things that are going to actually bring about change through our teachers, because one of the things that they mentioned was that they are now having a connectivity, that is the learners and the teachers and cooperation, and they are working together. The relationships have actually changed, that is the teacher-pupil relationship and also learner and learner relationships. So as a result of that, we found that basically you can't go wrong with introducing such a resource through a classroom resource through the curriculum. It has a very positive impact in changing the gender norms that exist and the social norms that exist. May we go to the next slide so that I can talk about enabling factors that actually bring about change. Some of the enabling factors that were found to bring about change, as I've already mentioned, with regards to gender and social norms, is basically training the teachers and also using approaches that are interactive in terms of teaching the methodology, enabling the learners to actually participate and be participatory, and to actually use approaches that are learner-centered, which they actually enjoyed when we were doing this pilot. They enjoyed the fact that they were playing games, and teachers also felt that, you know, this approach they were also going to use when they are teaching other subjects, because they found that they were very effective. And also the discussions and, you know, engaging in discussions and role playing. And basically that approach also helped when we're doing the training for the teachers, because the teachers were actually able to, you know, do those reflections and understand and actually be empathetic and put themselves in the students' or rather learners' shoes with regards to the challenges that they face each and every day in relation to issues of gender and social norms. And then, of course, it is very important that the teachers are passionate over what they do. And luckily for us, the teachers that we trained were actually the guidance and counseling teachers that teach life skills education. And life skills education basically addresses some of these things. But we found that one of the gaps in our life skills education program was the issue of gender. So it is going to gel in very well when we actually integrated into the life skills education program at the secondary school, because that is what was endorsed, considering that it aligns well with life skills education. Oh, and by the way, life skills education in Swaziland or in Eswatini is comprehensive sexuality education, so that we are basically politically right, culturally right. We use the word life skills education. And then another thing was that the availability of the resource when they were doing the actual piloting made a great difference. So it means that basically for teachers to be agents of change in issues of gender and social norms, they need to have the necessary resources that they can use to actually push the program and the agenda as well. And then of course, because as I mentioned earlier on, these teachers are guidance and counseling teachers. So they were supported by their peers that are also guidance and counseling teachers, and the other teachers also supported them. So they found this a very enabling factor. So those are the factors that actually can make it possible for teachers to be agents of change in terms of addressing these issues at curriculum and school level. And then, of course, they found that the training
Thank
of
you
the
so much,
school administrator.
Absolutely cut you off because
Thank
this
you.
is so engaging. I forgot to look at my time, but thank you so much for that question. Mr. Basil, Mr. Manuel, is there anything that you would like to add, perhaps, to this particular question? And I'd like us to just swiftly move on to our Q&A, where we'll get into the gist of it, get into the meat of it. Over to you, Mr. Basil, Mr. Manuel.
Yes, thank you. I want to particularly highlight some of the things that have been done, and other people may learn from it, and other people may give us some more information about how to make this work even better. One of our primary targeted programs was to create safe spaces for members and learners to talk about experiences, the so-called power hours that we had, which was deliberately designed to only last an hour so that people can commit to the time, because these are all post-school activities, and where teachers could come in and open discussions on GBV in their schools. What this led to, among other things, is, for example, one of our provinces raised and highlighted the high teenage pregnancy rate in a certain area. And our people from the province also moved in to start talking about the things that were happening there. And what we discovered was, of course, that there were a number of teachers involved, but more than that, of course, it was almost a program that expected that girls could fall pregnant, and that gave them an opportunity to access other means of income. And we had to start trying to change that. We haven't won the battle, but we've got to change the ideas around how you support yourself, etc. Then, of course, one of our big projects, which we are battling to get off the ground, but it's worth mentioning, is in the Eastern Cape, where we have tackled our traditional leaders, not insofar as dealing with the circumcision of boys. We have no issue with that. Boys are circumcised, just for the general audience, at about 13, 14 years of age. However, it's the education that happens when they are away in these clusters, in the forests and in the bushes. And we want our traditional leaders to ensure that they talk about responsible behavior as an adult male. And that has been a major challenge. And this Ulwaluko, as it is called in isiXhosa, has been a major battle, because we found that a lot of young men come out and they want to prove their manhood. Violence then results, and of course, young girls start falling pregnant. And so this is one of our major challenges. And traditional communities have to be dealt with in a particular fashion so as not to estrange them. But I just want to highlight the difficulties of 2020 and how it scuppered some of the things we wanted to do. However, we switched our mode, and we've had a number of webinars. We've had a number of outreaches. We publish widely, and we have a network of NGOs. There are many, many NGOs, but there's a firm network that is working with us. But we've also committed ourselves and committed to our schools and our women and girls particularly, that if a teacher is found guilty of GBV, we will not keep them as a member. Neither will we defend them. But now remember, I'm saying if they have been found guilty, because you are still a member and you've got to be defended before that. And it's a major issue, because we've got to show our people that we are committed to this. We're not interested in members that bring the profession into disrepute and are actually the abusers of our children and our learners. Then through our involvement, we've had a discipline conference a few years ago with the education department, because we took this to the DBE. the Department of Basic Education, and we've said to them, if you don't come on board, this doesn't have the traction it should have. Followed on to that, we had a school safety summit. Now, school safety is a very broad thing, and GBV fits in there, and SRGBV fits in there very nicely. But it hasn't had the same impact we wanted it to have, but it's a building block. One of the most important outflows of that was bringing the Department of Justice into this and assisting them with creating community-based programs on learner and educator safety. It is work in progress. It's a major exercise, but of course, this is something we're doing. We've then assisted in the publication of a handbook called Teachers' Rights, Responsibility and Safety Handbook, where NAPTOSA had a major input into that. Now, I'd like to talk more, but my time is up, and I know that Opiemi there is chomping at the bit to stop me. So let me stop right here before I get cut off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Manuel. Thank you very much. That was a very meaningful contribution, and I think it's something that resonates with all of the speakers that have spoken here today, is involving both our male, female, boys and girls in all our interventions, and looking and starting to sort of shine the light at the communities that these learners or students that we teach come from, involving parents. I know the union, NAPTOSA, is very vocal about parental involvement being an integral part of learner development and contributing to their academic success, but also as social beings, it contributes to the development there as well. I think that those tie in beautifully with what Umemba Tusile is saying about using the curriculum that we have as a tool. So looking at how we use life skills. In South Africa, we call that life orientation. So sort of readjusting and you know, redesigning, reimagining the subjects that we have and using those as a tool towards something meaningful progress towards alleviating gender-based violence. Very, very wonderful discussion that we've had there. And that will take us into the next bit of our session, which is our question and answer session. I can see our question and answer session there in the, what do they call it in English? That Q&A box there is very alive, very engaging questions that I would like to ask. The first question that we have from one of our audience members is, and it ties in beautifully with what we're just discussing, is recognizing the links between the norms in the community and the norms in the schools. I think this echoes this whole notion of schools being microcosms of societies and communities that they are built in. So how do we recognize those norms that are reflected, that are in our communities reflected in our schools? And how can parents or family members be change agents, along with teachers, which are also being change agents? I think I would like just to hear Mr. Basil, because this is something you already started us off on. Just 2 minutes, please just help us out with in responding to that question.
What we've recognized is that we can't divorce the school from the community that it is in. That is the first issue. The second issue, and not all communities have this, but certainly in the broader African context, we have a very powerful traditional leadership system. And if you don't tread carefully and ensure that you draw the people in with the right noises, you estrange people. And so the outreach to parents is extremely important. And to give parents a voice, because it is the parents who very often fall victim to a miscreant teacher coming and paying so-called damages because a girl has fallen pregnant. And they then don't pursue the matter further. And the teacher then goes on and impregnates somebody else. And so it goes on. We've had terrible examples of that. So unless the parents have a voice, and unless the parents accept that these things are wrong, we won't win. And so part of our strategy has been community radios. They are the greatest invention. We have hundreds of community radio stations, and we have many, many speakers who get onto these radio stations and speak to the parents in the vernacular, in the language that the people understand on the ground, about their roles and responsibilities and how we must support one another in that. I can stop there, otherwise I'm going to ramble. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. I would like just to call on Caroline. Maybe you can join us here, because I know your organization speaks a lot to, I want to call it a multi-stakeholder approach to addressing the issues that we are discussing here today, and talking about how to provide guidance to, you know, senior educators, provincial DOE, departments of education, and providing them with the guidance, equipping them with the guidance necessary to equip the teachers and so on and so forth, creating this cascading effect of progression and change. So maybe you want to speak to this as well as school leaders. How can school leaders sort of be equipped better, or how can they better be in a better position to address school-related gender-based violence within their spaces of influence as well? Caroline?
Thank you very much, Bangiwe, for the questions. What we are working in Ecuador with are the professional learning communities of school leaders. So what we do there is we have given them trainings on the gender perspective and the gender focus. And this space of professional learning communities unites school leaders from different schools so that they can, we are very strong on trying to build a common vision, a common perspective through the lenses, through the glasses of gender. And so through these professional learning communities, the school leaders develop an inquiry based practice approach. So what they do is together trying to focus on certain themes, and one of them can be gender, where they will look into the schools, how gender perspective is being included in the practices of the teachers in the class. So they will use, they're aware of all the tools that exist, and they will together reinforce themselves between themselves to see if they can observe change within the class, within the schools, within the visions. So they impulse from the management and policy at school level activities that include all the different actors within the whole school approach to see that gender-based violence can be approached by all the different actors. I think that the school leader indeed has a crucial role in supporting teachers, supporting all the actors and uniting all the actors of the school community to see how they can fight these social norms. So in Ecuador, we have also a very important problem on teen pregnancies on the one hand, and one of the crucial things for keeping the girls in the schools, because what would happen is that parents out of shame would keep their girls from going to schools, or boys would go to work to provide. So one of the key roles for the school leaders there is include a policy based on the tools that are developed and that exist to try to maintain the kids in the school. So I think really that this professional learning communities have for us played a very important role to try to oversee and to create a policy at school level involving all the different actors, and maintain them in this conversation, continuing to explore, to give the parents a voice, to give the kids a voice, and continuing to explore how we can break this gender-based violence.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Perhaps at this point, I can ask Mamno Sipho to step in here for a second, and just maybe echo what Carolyn just mentioned of, empowering the voices of teachers, empowering the voices of our learners, and with your work that you do, the participatory work, research work that you're doing, how do you think that's something that can be used in sort of introducing and empowering our learners to speak more and to I don't know how to phrase my question to you, but how do we use participatory research and participatory approaches to sort of teach so that they can learn to differentiate between, because at the sometimes the terminology that is used when discussing issues of sexual violence is confusing for people, and sometimes for learners themselves, they are finding themselves in a position where they are unable to recognize where they've been victimized. So maybe speak to that, Mam Nosipho, and let us know how do we challenge these norms in our school?
Okay. First of all, discussing school-related gender-based violence is not easy. It means you need first to create spaces to talk about pain. When facilitating a school-related gender-based violence initiative, especially with teachers, you first of all need to be prepared to deal with the trauma that will be triggered by this discussion. That's one challenge. Because to prepare educators to drive initiative like this, it's important to train them, to create safe spaces in which participants can talk about their painful experiences, and processing involves acknowledging and expressing and reflecting. That is why, I had a second image where looking at mind-body work, because we experimented with methodologies such as Tai Chi, which help create a safe space for participants to connect with the subject as well as feel supported to speak their truth. And we also experimented with different participatory methodologies like the open space, the World Cafe, and used a lot of popular culture and drama and poetry, because because violence is so normalized in our society, we embody some of these issues, and it becomes very difficult to speak about them. And breaking the silence becomes the first thing, even for teachers themselves, because teachers themselves experience gender-based violence, and this is an issue that also challenges them. So it is very important for us to be using creative methodologies like, with your Tai Chi, because you're creating a space where people don't feel judged, where they feel comfortable to speak their truth. It looks soft, but it speaks to the heart. And I think one thing as trade unions, we also need to try and connect to the heart in doing interventions on school-related gender-based violence.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mam Nosipho. Thank you to the rest of our panelists for very informative and meaningful contributions. I think we have a lot to sort of digest this evening. It's evening on my end. A lot to digest. And I think the big takeaway from this discussion is, if we're going to shift from these social norms that are harmful and gender roles that are harmful, and play a very restricting role in the progression of our society as a whole, we need to shift the mindset of ourselves as people in society, but shift the mindsets of our learners as they continue to develop. I think a developing mind is one mind that can also develop society, and it's up to us as teachers, as learners, as researchers, as organizations and different stakeholders to sort of contribute positively to that development of that positive mindset. Once again, thank you so much for joining our discussion. Hopefully we'll have many more of these productive ones. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us. Please contact us. You can visit the websites that you're seeing on your screen now. You can visit Ungai. On Instagram, it's @Ungai Girls Education, and Twitter is @Ungai, and Facebook is @Ungai, Ungai. Please, the contact information is all on the screen. Thank you so much for your questions and contributions. Please visit once again our speakers on their websites for their relative organizations, Facebook pages, which will be shared as well with this recording. Thank you so much for your contributions. Good evening, good morning, good day. From myself and Opeyemi, goodbye. Thank you.